called this message "Love the Stranger," and it fits in with all of our talks on love your spouse, love the church, and this one, love the stranger. But what does it actually mean when we say love the stranger? And I guess I want to just jump off by saying that really, I'll sort of let the cat out of the bag. I'm talking about hospitality. The word for love the stranger in the New Testament really is just hospitality. But it's incredibly important. And we get the sense of the importance of this when we hear Jesus talking about the future, sort of the total future, the end future, in Matthew 25, when he says, "Then the king will say, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you. For I was hungry, and you fed me. I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me into your home.'" Just think about that for a second. I was a stranger, and you invited me into your home. I mean, when we think about the other things that Jesus mentioned, I was hungry and you fed me. Well, we could do a project for that. We can get some food together. We can donate to the food bank. We can take care of that, and that's plenty safe, and we can make a project of it. When you think of the other things of, I was thirsty and you gave me a drink, well, that sort of fits in there too. You know, it's sort of a one-off thing that we can do to help out the needy in our city or whatever it may be. But we can make a project and we can do that and then sort of wash our hands of it and say, yeah, we did that. But when Jesus says, I was a stranger and you invited me into your home, all of a sudden it gets really personal, because the home is sort of that place where we take refuge. It's the place where we feel safe and we secure ourselves there. And what Jesus is saying is that we need to even open our homes to this stranger. And of course, that is the basic idea of what hospitality is. And so as we think about this idea of hospitality, I want to break it down into the New Testament word itself. As you know, the Hebrew Bible was written in Hebrew, the Old Testament, and parts of it in Aramaic. And of course, Jesus would have spoken Aramaic. That was his language that he talked to his disciples. And when the New Testament was written, the main language of the day is Greek. And Jesus would have spoken Greek too. He was a carpenter. He did business, and business people, even though they have a mother tongue, they use other languages to make money. You have to in life. And we see that everywhere we go. And so when we read the New Testament, we read it in the original language, in Greek. And the word for hospitality in the Greek language is actually two words that are mashed together. And you know, sometimes that's not helpful when we look at the individual words in a compound word like butterfly. That really doesn't help us. You know, we think of butterfly, well, we think of a butterfly. We don't think of butter, and we don't think of flies, right? So sometimes it's not that helpful, but other times it actually helps us understand the word. For instance, seashell. When we say seashell, we understand that it has something to do about the sea and something to do about a shell. And we can put those ideas together, and it helps us define the word itself. And so when we look at this New Testament word for hospitality, it's philoxenia. And it's a strange word for us in English, of course, but in the Greek language, it's just a word. But it has two distinct parts, just like seashell has sea and shell. This word, philoxenia, has two words. Let's look at those two words. The first part is this word philos, and it basically means friend. It means the love that you have for a friend. And at its heart, it means love, but it's a friendship love. And the Greeks had 4 different words for love. We have one. We don't get confused by the fact that we only have one word. I can say, I love my spouse. I can say, I love pizza, and nobody gets confused about that, what we mean. But the Greeks would have had different words for that. They had 4 different words to describe the different kinds of love that people had. And C.S. Lewis wrote a great book on this called The 4 Loves. It's a classic. It's old, but it's definitely worth reading. And this word, to love as a friend, is the first part of that compound word for hospitality. And it helps us when we see the word to understand that at the heart of this idea of hospitality is the idea of loving someone as a friend. of opening the door of friendship for someone who is unknown to us. And we're just reminded about that idea of love and friendship right in the word itself. And the second part, I've given that away already, xenos, it means strange. And like every language, if you put the word one or person or thing after it, it means that the adjective strange becomes a noun, stranger, or, the different one. And that's what this is. This is the idea of something strange, something foreign, something different. And so in the Greek language, these two words are actually, in all languages, I think, the idea of friend and loving somebody as a friend and stranger, different, foreigner, those really are almost opposite concepts. You have the strangers, the people you don't know, and then you have your friends, right? You have the people you're showing friendship to. And we know how to treat friends, or at least we should. If we have friends, we know. Jesus taught us, do to others what you would want them to do to you. That's kind of the heartbeat of friendship, isn't it? There's that old expression to have a friend, be a friend, right? That's basically it. It's not complicated. It's not complicated to understand. It's just hard to do sometimes. And that's the essence of friendship. And when you pull these words together, you get this Greek word for hospitality. But the fact is we often want to keep these words separate, don't we? We want the stranger over here, we want the friend over here, and in between we have this wall, a wall that divides both stranger and friend. And really, when we look at the New Testament, the power of the gospel is about tearing down that wall. And that's the thing I really want to share. It's not so much about friendship, love, and about strangers and foreigners, different people than us. That's important to understand in order to understand what hospitality is. But I think the heart of the issue is the fact that we have this wall that separates those two ideas, those two concepts, and actually two groups of people. People we consider friends, people we consider strangers. But when we look at the Bible, what we see in the life of Jesus is that Jesus was really a wall smasher. And we see that in Paul in Ephesians 2:14. He says, he's speaking about Jesus here, for he himself is our peace. He's made the two groups one and destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility. So this wall of hostility, this wall that keeps us separate, keeps friends from strangers. Jesus came to tear down that wall, to break down that wall. And so we see Jesus as a wall smasher. And so the question we need to ask ourselves is that, are we on sort of Jesus' team and are we wall smashers, or are we wall builders? Are we sitting there trying to reinforce the wall, make it stronger? Or are we people who are trying to tear it down, to smash it down? And everywhere in the New Testament, we see Jesus smashing this down. Paul tells us straight up, but we see it in the life of Jesus, whether he's talking to a Samaritan woman at the well, or whether he's healing the child of a Syrophoenician woman, or whether he's touching a leper, an untouchable. All through the life of Jesus, we see him taking the person on the outside, the person on the other side of that wall, and embracing them, of drawing them in. And that's the interesting thing about that Matthew passage, is that the word that's used there, I was a stranger and you invited me into your home, the word that's used there actually is just to embrace. It's part of the custom of the ancient Near East, of Jesus' day, that you would give a hug and give a kiss of peace to the person who was coming into your home. And it was a welcome. It was a you were accepting them as a friend gesture. And here we see Jesus doing this same kind of thing in the lives of people who everyone around him would have seen as being someone on the other side of that wall. But Jesus had no respect for the wall. He was a wall smasher. And so when we take this word hospitality, this two words made into another word, this friendship love of a stranger, and we make that into a word that we translate as hospitality, we see that it's not just about understanding what a word is. We see that it's actually something that we need to do. And, the writer of Hebrews, he says, do not neglect hospitality, because through it some have entertained angels without knowing it. And I think Jesus ups the game a bit here too, because, while Hebrews is talking about that Old Testament story where the angels are invited in through hospitality, and they didn't know they're angels, of course. Jesus is saying, when you invite the stranger in, you've invited me. So in other words, Jesus is, when we accept the stranger, we're somehow in the midst of that accepting Jesus. Where Jesus is living out through that person. We are actually doing it for him, as Matthew 25. When you have done it for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you've done it to me. And so when we read those words, we have to take seriously this idea that showing hospitality is directly connected to living out the gospel. Because Jesus did say, I was the stranger, and you invited me into your home. Now, I think that, these words of Jesus are a big deal. I think that they are words that we need to listen and we need to take to heart. There's a lot of things that we need to engage in when we're following Jesus. Of course there are. But one at the heart of it is this idea of breaking down walls of difference between people. And the fact is, and you know this, that we're mostly strangers. When I look at the city of Moncton and Riverview, Dieppe, and the areas around here, most of the people I don't know. They don't know me. I'm a stranger to them. And often we get this sense of, stranger danger. We're afraid of the stranger. And there are real fears out there. There are real reasons to be afraid. I'm not trying to diminish that at all. And we need to be cautious and careful in every situation, of course. But if the reason of fear is driving every single interaction, then we have to ask ourselves whether or not we're truly showing the hospitality of Jesus Christ in our lives. And so, again, it's a time for reflection. It's a time for us to ask ourselves the question, are we like Jesus, breaking down walls and opening the door of friendship to people who are different than ourselves? Or are we just simply status quo people who are building that wall, reinforcing that wall, and feeling really safe on our side of it? Now, again, I'm not saying don't be safe. You have to be safe, obviously. But the point is that if we're using safety as an excuse to never make new friends, to never open the door of friendship and friendship love to someone who's a stranger to us, maybe we're not really following Jesus after all. And so take these words to heart that Jesus says here in Matthew 25, that at the end of the age, when Jesus comes back and when he judges all people, one of the metrics, as they say, the things that Jesus measures true Christian commitment by, is that I was a stranger, he says, and you invited me into your home. That's something we need to take seriously. It's something we need to think about.